CARICOM calls for all parties in Guyana to work together to complete the electoral process amid protests in the country. The Ministry of Health warns people with coronavirus symptoms about going to the QEH. And in sports history for Jelon Samuels aboard Night Prowler in the Sandy Lane Gold Cup.
Broadcasting from our studios in the Pine St. Michael, this is CBC Newsnight, starting now.
A very good evening to you with this weekend edition of CBC Newsnight. I'm Ryan Broom. In our top story, it comes from the Sandy Lane Gold Cup where jockey Jelon Samuels rode Night Prowler into the history books during the Sandy Lane Gold Cup today. Now this is victory number 5 for Samuels in the prestigious racing event. Last year's defending champion, Celestial Storm, finished 5th. Now we will have a full recap of the race during Sports Night. And now to our news major. Chairman of CARICOM Barbados Prime Minister Mia Moore-Motley is calling on electoral officials and political parties in Guyana to work together to achieve a peaceful and lawful completion of the electoral process. Now the appeal comes some 5 days after Guyanese went to the polls in national and regional elections. It follows some lawless incidents that have occurred in the country over the past 72 hours, which escalated with the death of a young man yesterday. Now, in a statement, the CARICOM chairman says electoral officials should seek to ensure the tabulation of the results in all regions, using the statement of polls in a transparent manner. Now, Prime Minister Motley adds this should also be done in the presence of the representatives of the political parties and electoral observers.
We are very clear that every vote must be made to count, and transparently so. We have noted that all sides have been making serious allegations against each other. It is critical that good sense prevail. The preservation of law and order is paramount, and all parties must work hard to ensure that there is peace on the roads in Guyana and peace in the communities across Guyana. We have been instructed that there has already been 1 death reported overnight. That is 1 death too many.
The CARICOM chairman adds the regional group stands ready to lend whatever assistance is needed to bring a peaceful and lawful conclusion to the electoral process.
In simple language, we ask the parties to recognize that the primary consideration must be not only who will be president, but more so, who will be alive come next week or next month, for there cannot be a tolerance for any further loss of life. I have this morning yet again spoken to both the President and the Leader of the Opposition and indicated that CARICOM stands ready to be able to be there to facilitate further dialogue and any actions that are necessary. We have done this on many occasions in the past, including in Guyana, when elections have been highly contentious and when social order and the rule of law has been threatened across the region.
In other news now, the Ministry of Health will be establishing a hotline to deal with people who may be exhibiting symptoms of the coronavirus. And these people are being told not to go to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital as they will be handled differently. Acting Chief Medical Officer Dr. Kenneth George says there was a situation on Thursday where a patient went to the QEH with symptoms but tested negative and was discharged the same day. But this is not the advisable practice. Dr. George says they are advising private practitioners to get familiar with the guidelines to deal with any patient who may have symptoms, as they will be on the front line in containing the virus.
In simple language, we ask the parties to...
If it becomes that COVID becomes very widespread in Barbados, 80% of those cases will have to be managed by persons in primary care, whether it be in the polyclinics or whether it be in the general practitioners. And that's why we're urging the general practitioners to come on board. We've issued a few guidelines because there was a lot of uncertainty, and we issued those guidelines as to how they can manage to deal with a case if it ever comes to their private office in a way that contains the whole issue.
Now, meanwhile, in related news, the Barbados government has expanded its COVID-19 quarantine protocol to apply to passengers arriving in Barbados from all of Italy. Previously, only people arriving from 3 districts in the north of the country were impacted by the 14-day quarantine requirement. Acting Chief Medical Officer Dr. Kenneth George says the decision is based on the latest available information from the World Health Organization and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Additionally, the Ministry of Health and Wellness has advised residents of Barbados against all non-essential travel to Italy with immediate effect. Welcome back. Well, young people have another avenue to develop their unique skills into careers in the cultural and creative industries. It comes with the launch of the new National Community Cultural Training Program. We get more in this report from Lorna Jones.
The National Community Cultural Training Program will be facilitated through the National Cultural Foundation on behalf of the Ministry of Culture. NCF CEO Carol Roberts-Refer says at its core is the needs of Barbadian youth.
We went out and we asked questions, we did focus groups. We also leaned heavily on the Community Development Department to find out what are some of the areas in which young people will be interested, and then that's how we fashioned the program.
The tutors for the 12 modules are all established in their fields. Ms. Roberts-Refer says they have valuable knowledge to share.
To show them how they can take a simple training opportunity and turn it into a livelihood. And how are you all going to do that? You tell them, because this is how you've made a living now for decades and decades.
2 of the tutors are artist Rasakem and musician Terry Mexican Arthur.
It is in your interest and your own initiative to seize the opportunity. This initiative is one that I think the young people would be eager to grab at.
I know that we can do a great job, and I know it can make an impact. I know that for a fact. Because music has given me everything. I mean, the possibilities are so great.
Modules will be taught at various community centers across the island.
We are challenged with the task of making these centers not only appear to be open and being used, but to have them being used and to serve the people for whom they were designed to serve.
The program is open to young people between the ages of 16 and 30. Lorna Jones, CBC News.
Thanks, Lorna. Well, despite the strides made by women in several spheres in Barbados and the Caribbean, there's a suggestion a number of critical questions still remain. This is a view of President of Trinidad and Tobago, Paula Mae Weeks, who queries whether the changes are mere window dressing or represent tangible progress. Now, Ms. Mae Weeks delved into the topic during the International Women's Day Distinguished Lecture. Our Kishmar St-Jeest reports.
Using the United Nations Women's Generational Equality Campaign as a guide, Her Excellency Paula Mae Weeks is rallying for a fair world that is ultimately better for both men and women alike. The UN campaign, among other things, demands equal pay, an end to sexual harassment and all forms of violence against women and girls, as well as health services that respond to their needs. Ms. Weeks believes unequal pay is among barriers to female economic independence.
It therefore behoves us to ensure that equality of payment is achieved through, among other measures, legislative and policy guarantees, which among other things ensure that maternity does not adversely affect earning, school curricula, which from early childhood prepare girls and women to be assertive and confident in all facets of life, including bargaining and negotiating, and continual training for employers on unconscious gender bias.
Education has been identified as a field in which Caribbean women are holding their own. However, Ms. Weeks says access to education leans more heavily in favor of boys.
Since girls' education is often derailed by factors which do not affect boys, for example, early teenage pregnancy, and some deep-rooted cultural and religious beliefs and practices. Despite the data, men often go on to earn more than their female peers, where there is flexibility in remuneration packages. This is an unhappy and unhealthy